Hello ladies and gents, Harlequin D here, bringing you a slightly belated Tyrant Unleashed Rise of the Imperials Guild War video, Grizzly Bairs style. It won't be a live recording, there was just too much footage. Instead I thought I'd run you quickly through my deck construction, some of the strategy and tactics employed by bears during the war, and show a close fight we had using video captured over the 3 days. So, without further ado, our commander, Barracus with that Protect, Stripping, Enfeeble 1, a Strike 1, and an unused in my deck Enhanced Poison 2. Our flagship unit, the Demi-Constrictor, huge survivability with that large health pool and Evade 4, and nasty counter 7, which means he starts doing damage as soon as he's placed, and if he activates, a layer of Enfeeble all 3. We then bring in 2 cards that synergise well with the Demi, the Arknova Elite and the Tazarus. The Arknova has decent survivability, packing Evade 3 and Inhibit 2, while the Taz provides a quick jam and a decent punch. More importantly, the Taz has a Xeno-focused heal designed to keep the Demi and the Arknova up long enough to hopefully benefit from the Enfeeble all 3 from the Demi, coupled with Strike all 2 from the Arknova Elite. Mix this in with Mortars, and the potential field clearance is huge. So next we bring in some utility in the form of the Sacred Sanctuary for its Heal all 3, Rally all 2 and Weaken 4, along with the Purifier quad for its Quick Weaken 4. So at this point we have some decent utility in the form of a quick jam from the Taz and 2 cards given Weaken, which kind of slows down the enemy deck a bit. However, we could do with some more jam and so bring in the Augur Ream. The Augur also carries a reliable punch, as the Rally Imperial 5 will only ever fall on the Augur, as I'm not running any other Imperials in deck at the moment. The final 2 cards in my deck are both Raider cards, the Trampling Anvil and the Steel Maiden. Trampling Anvil is still decent for my deck, acting as a mini tank with Armor 3 and Protect Raider 4. He's got a decent punch with the Rally Raider 6, and if I place him properly I can make sure both skills hit the anvil. It performs fairly well as a counter to the skill counter due to the Protect, and will toe-to-toe a Demi without an issue. He's also my clutch tank when I need that little bit of extra time and need to make a sacrifice really over unit. The Steel Maiden on the other hand is getting a bit long in the tooth, to be honest. While he's an absolute beast when it gets going with that Berserk 3, it's got no survivability and it's really starting to show as time goes on, and the meta just quickens or cards become more powerful. And in fact, on day 2 I decided to replace the Steel Maiden and put him out to pasture with my Apex Overdrive, and I've replaced him with an Ayrkrane Syn, built using the rewards from the last Brawl. It's got a 1 cooldown, Pierce 6, Strike 5, it's got good survivability for a CD1 with Armor 4 and a fair health pool, and it can absolutely rip through cards like this Italian first drop Steadfast Assailant, which we know can get out of hand with its Rally Imperial 6, Protect Imperial 5 and Berserk 2 on a 2 CD with a fairly good health pool of 22, and it just smashes it. And the potential for this deck, given that it's a free-to-play deck, is pretty amazing, to be honest. I mean, the damage potential is huge. You can see it in this clip here with Eclipse. It's a core hit. We'd obviously surrendered by removing our defense structures, but still went in for core. We've got 2 mortars with us. First drop is Wars of Brazen, very scary, lots of flurry. Pierce 7, Weaken all 2. Very scary card. Stick the Demi in, and Wars of Brazen just goes, what was that? Bolt next, yep, we'll eat that as well. Bring in the synergy with the Xeno Hill from the Taz, and just kind of get the jam off on that. We're going to bring in the Arknova Elite so that we can time it with the Enfeeble all 3 coming out from the Demi-Constrictor. And these very expensive cards that we're seeing here just have nowhere to go. You know, the Taz is going to probably, I think, heal himself up through that poison on the next go. We'll bring in the extra strike from the Ayrkrane Syn to benefit and timed well off the Enfeeble 3, and watch this field clear. I mean, you get the Enfeeble 3 go out, then you get your Taz come in, the Arknova come in, the strike come in from the Syn, and it doesn't matter what cards are played now, there is nowhere to go. The huge amount of strike, the mortars are now activated, and that's game over right there. I mean, this is another flurry unit. This is a pretty scary one again, lots of leech coming off of those flurries, but there really is nowhere to go with that amount of strike, that amount of enfeeble on the quick cards. So the deck performs pretty well. I was very happy with it. What we'll do is, after this clip, go into take a look at a close war that was fought over, I think it was the 2nd day or something like that. It was a pretty tight war against Deutsche Helden. They're a top 50 guild, but more importantly they were ranked 37 in the current guild war, so they were only 1 above us, which meant that we knew that they were going to fight hard for this. They were running dual force fields, so we'd swap to spores to take out the protect layer. The mortars don't work so well, but I'll talk about structures a bit later on. You can see actually it was the 3rd day. Enhanced counter is up to 3. And my role during these wars with anything in the top 75 is pretty much to hit the defense. I could take core. In most cases I've managed to score against core. However, by taking out the defense, it allows the weaker decks to hit an empty slot. So that's what I'm doing here, straight into a structure fight, one force field on the field. There's quite a lot of counter around on the enemy deck, but nothing too worrying at this point. Running the dual spores strips out some of that protect from the force field, but the strike isn't as devastating as we'd normally see. So I don't get full field clear, but it is enough to take out the deck. Bring in the jam from the Taz just to slow them down a little bit. I'm aware that the Constrictor is going to miss its Enfeeble 3 this turn, but is ready for the next turn with the Ayrkrane Elite. So we'll see how that strike does with the protect in play from the force field. It will still do some damage, but you can see that there's evade and protect that we need to strip out. So it wasn't quite as devastating, but it was still pretty good, and it's enough to roll through this fight for the win on the defense. You can see over on the right hand side the line app. This is the ubiquitous kind of communication channel of choice for top guilds. A variety of different rooms with alerts and whatnot, so that we can kind of give commands. You'll see me using that quite a lot to communicate. The real art to war is just communication with all the members and being aware of what the enemy's doing, constant monitoring and checking performance of both our decks and their decks against the various defensive structures. So we go into the second fight, again against the defensive slot, playing the Ayrkrane Elite, trying to get some strike out quickly, but also for the evade to try and dodge some of this inhibit and strike that's coming down from the enemy Ayrkrane Elite. The Syn coming out again. Our Never Elite is inhibited, but we'll get the strike out, so we'll see how that does at the front of the deck. The strike raining down there, again benefiting from the spores in this case, stripping out the protect and the evade from some of the cards on the enemy deck, which is quite nice. Just watching out, there's quite a lot of jam on, but really with that amount of units on my side, this has already been won. So we take the enemy deck down to 1 or 2 cards, and from there, with our cards already activated, the strike's going to come down, benefiting from the enfeeble from both the commander and the structures. So generally I'll go 5 hits on a defensive slot, opening up the slot, and saving 5 for core hits in case it's needed after. And here is a good example of where the Bears training kicks in. You can see that somebody's having trouble on the defensive slot with the force field. They've sort of communicated that in line, which allows us to communicate back to let them know that we're hitting the defensive slot. It's going to be opened. Save your hits, don't waste your stam getting those 10 points for a loss, and be ready as soon as the slot goes down to pour your stam into the empty slot, which of course means that you fight with no enemy structures, allowing you to get sort of 60-point wins or so. And that's really in essence the tactics that we would employ for a sort of top 50 or thereabouts guild. And you can see throughout the course of this fight just how important it is to communicate, how quick people are to take commands and issue orders, and that's kind of a theme throughout this close fight. So getting back to this battle in hand, you can see that I had a appalling opening hand with no evade to dodge the strike coming down, so I had to kind of sacrifice the Purifier quad. The lucky jam kind of makes it survive an extra turn, but he does go down to the Spiteful Raptor. Using the Corrosive Spores still, 2 against 1 force field, so with the Demi Constrictor coming out now and followed by the Augur, and then I think the Arcnova is what I play next, there's no real trouble dealing with this deck at the moment. I actually go ahead and play the Syn. I should probably have played the Arcnova Elite. There's no need to play the Syn there. He's going to get jammed by the Taz, or potentially jammed by the Taz. A Boundless Blight, that's pretty ugly. Luckily he's not on the field for very long. We quickly dispatch him, I believe. And you can see a jam coming off on the Nova Elite there, which is quite unusual given its evade kind of skill. But with the spores kind of really wiping out not only the protect from the force field, but also evades on the cards, managed to get the jam off on it, which is quite nice, and jammed again there. So you can see the spores working fairly well against either a protect heavy or a evade heavy deck. And we'll take that win. Have a quick check at how we're doing. So you can see the scores are fairly close. There's about 250 in it at the moment. I believe in this fight I make a few crucial mistakes and let a bolt get out of hand. Let's take a look and see how we do. I know that I lose one of the fights on the defense slot, which is rather unfortunate, but doesn't really change the outcome of the match. We get a jam off against that Zodiac there. They've got a sort of Noble Defiance out, got a Vigil out. We'll play the Augur. This is all fairly standard play at this point. We could do with some sort of backing it up with something that can punch fairly hard. There's quite a lot of heal coming out. 3 cards with heal now. With the protect from both the commander and the force field, I'm just having difficulty punching through the start of the deck to place that bolt at the beginning of the deck. Even though it's not a quad bolt, it still gets out of hand very quickly, and unless I've got it at the front of the deck where my activated cards are dealing with it. In this case I just got bogged down, slowed down too much. I couldn't bite through the hill, which means that the bolt has now got free reign, although it's up against an army unit, and the best unit at dealing with it, the Syn. You can see that massive amount of hill coming in, and the Syn just can't keep up with it, even with its pierce skill. So although we're getting some jams off and dispatching some cards, the enemy deck just kind of snowballs, dealing too much damage too quickly once I've let it sit around for too long. So that's kind of the mistake. Looking at it again, I'm not quite sure what I could have done. There may be some sort of ploy that I could have played that could have sped up the initial damage rather than kind of setting up for a later game. But I do lose this one. And at the end of the day, you're always going to get games where your cards don't come out quite right. And I think coming out in a different order, I could have kind of upped the damage initially. If the Syn had come out first, he could have been cutting through the protected hill units, hopefully take those out, get some jams in. But that's just the way it rolls sometimes. Some you lose, some you win. And you can see that bolt just going out of hand, even though it's not a quad, as I said earlier. It's still a monster if you don't shut it down quickly. So having a quick look at the scores, Deutsche Helden have actually moved into the lead by a couple of 100 points. So there is, I mean, we were 250 at the beginning of that last match, and they've moved up considerably. So we knew it was going to be tight. We knew that they were going to push us. We are still working on the defences, so although the point difference is now in favour of the enemy, we have to keep in mind at this point that we've got bears sitting there waiting for the stronger decks to take out that defence, and that becomes crucial late game in this match. So we've gone in again for a defence hit. We've got to get that slot down as quickly as possible. This is kind of a roll through. My kind of sustainability of the deck is in place, it's up. I've got the armor unit at the front just chewing through the protected armor cards, the heal up in the Sacred Sanctuary, the Constrictor out, and the Arc Nova out. So that was an easy game, and with that win I believe the defense slot goes down at that point. So a 400 score difference in favour of the enemy, but their defense is now down, which means that we can communicate at this time to the bears that are waiting with stamina reserves and let them loose, hitting the empty slot if they can't take the call with the one defense, as we know some of them can't, but now picking up more points than if they were just sort of wasting stam on a slot that they can't win. So communication goes out on all mediums. We put it in line, we put it in the in-game for those that are sort of on 3G mobile who aren't able to access line at that time, and tell them to go. Bringing to bear the stand reserves that were in place, and you can see the instant impact on the score. A massive jump to a 500 point lead or thereabouts. I'm still slightly concerned by the scores, even though we're looking far better than we were originally. And I kind of make the decision at this point to put an announcement out. And the way that Line works is that most of us keep notifications off for the normal rooms, but for the announcements channel we get notifications coming through to the mobile, to tablets and whatnot if one of us places something in there, and it really just lets people know that aren't online that we've got a tough fight. If you can log in, please do log in, and just bring those sort of reserves in, especially now the defense is down. So for the stronger ones coming online, they can hit the call for max points. For weaker decks coming online, they've got an empty slot to hit immediately. So with an empty slot for the reserve bears to be hitting, an announcement out online bringing in new bears, just starting to watch the actual score difference now. It's a fine balance when fighting these close wars between overkilling, overcommitting, and using all your energy, and kind of just getting that 1 to 2 to 2.5k lead and kiting them towards the end, watching out for any rush. So at the 1.5k mark, I start communicating kind of that people just need to be aware of this lead. And as we close up to the 2k mark and finally the 2.5k mark, trying to reel the bears back, which is no easy task when you've kind of put out the announcements and the notifications that they need to go for it. It's a tight fight, put everything into it. To then reel them back can be difficult, but it is one of those fine balances because you are going into a fight straight after, and last day you've got to win everything. So start trying to bring those claws back in, communication out again, lots of communication just so that people start seeing it, start getting the signal through to them, and then just really close monitoring of scores, making sure you're happy with the progression of the decks that are coming online, making sure you're happy with the lead, just monitoring how people are doing, who's fighting, how many you've got fighting, and then constant reinforcement of the message, whatever that message is, to play more aggressively, to retain the lead, to slow down, etc. Just constant reinforcement of signals going out so that people see it and respond accordingly. So while that's going on in the background, let's talk a bit about structures. We did a huge amount of preparatory work ahead of the Guild War, simming pretty much every single deck with every combination of structure, and came up with a couple of game plans that benefited the whole guild. In the majority of situations, the whole guild benefited most from dual mortar towers, with the strike all 3. For the defensive structure, Foreboding Archway typically did the best with Enfeeble all 3 and Weaken 6. However, in one case specifically, the Corrosive Spore would actually perform better guild-wide, and that's typically when the enemy was running force fields as their defensive structure, using the Corrosive 3 and the Enfeeble all 2 mainly to strip out that protect, allowing us to play our pretty strike-heavy, quick decks against it and get through that protect. Likewise, if the enemy was running mortar towers, then the force fields would be put in place of the Foreboding Archway, and you can actually do this in the preparation phase of each match. Looking back at the game against Deutsche Helden, you can see that they've closed to 2.1, so I decided to go ahead and take a core hit for max points, pick up a very easy deck compared to some of the ones that I was fighting on the defensive slot, an unmaxed Barracus, a single Tartarus, a Blitz plate, nothing that's in any danger at all of doing me any damage. But it's a good representation of how much care you have to take over using your energy and when to use it. I've got 5 hits in hand plus timer, but I'm being very cautious to conserve for the next fight, and just using it where they're getting too close or I need to give it a boost, and all the bears are doing the same thing. With the communications going out and the commands going out to maintain, to kite, to watch them, you're only hitting when you desperately need to, even though Deutsche Helden are pushing us quite hard and continuing to fight despite the scoreline as it stands at the moment. And then it's just a case of watching. You've got 38 minutes left on the clock. At the moment you've got about a 2.1k lead. You've got to be very careful with that. They could be saving energy for a rush at the end. Keep that constant communication up. So for people that are just joining, tell them where to put their energy, tell them what to do, make sure that nobody kind of just goes ham on the wrong thing really. And that's really what it comes down to for that mid part of the game. You've done your initial hit, the defense is down, you put out the communications. It's a case of watching now until the last sort of 20 minutes or thereabouts. So as I mentioned at the beginning, I did max out my Ayrkrane Syn as the rewards from the last sort of brawl. I'm going to put the maxing of that down in the bottom right. I know some of you like to see the drops that I get from that. I got royally trolled in this drop, as you'll see right at the end of the video. My calculations said I should have made this. The RNG gods were not favouring me. Getting back to the game, just checking through scores, checking through decks, performance, how many people haven't logged in, what's the potential for more people logging in on Deutsche Helden's side, and just kind of creating the buffer to deal with that if it happens, and that constant sort of tweaking of commands, of communication. And I kind of remember that, hey, I haven't been in the arena for a good 30 minutes, I'm missing my gold, so a little bit of maintenance on my sort of account at this point, so you get to watch me doing some quick fights, arty hunting, try and pick up those artifacts. That's a good source of SP and a potential source of epics. So running through very quickly some fights. Now I auto most of the fights, to be honest. I might play the first couple of cards if it's an important arty, but typically it's auto all the way nowadays. Apart from righteous decks really hurt. It's one of the things about having a high BR is that I can't tell who's stolen my artifacts anymore. So I typically go into a fight and then sort of lose to a righteous heavy heal protect deck, which is kind of annoying. But you know, if it's Barracus, I'll quite happily auto that up to 190 normally, 200 sometimes. For righteous, I'll play manually, 150 up really. So then checking through artifacts, looking for reinforcements, pick up 1 rare, 2 rares, and then boom! Nice recording of the epic pickup on the reinforcement there. It's quite fortuitous. A little bit of missions, just trying to pick up those sort of health packs to fix up the structures afterwards. I don't think I'll pick up any there. And at this point in the game, they've actually closed to a 2k gap, so they are still fighting hard. They obviously think that they've got a chance of taking it with either higher activity coming on or a rush at the end. So it's just something that to be very aware of, is how that leads developing over time. Do I need to drop some more energy in? Do we need to give a signal to fight harder? But we extend to a 2.1 again quite quickly after that, and again to a 2.2. So looking okay on the lead, just need to keep the communication up to warn people to watch for rushes as the time starts ticking down. So next I want to talk a bit more about structures. I did mention earlier that we were using dual mortars in most cases, unless faced with force fields, in which case we would try and swap to using the corrosive spores to nullify some of that protect and to help strip out any more evade within the deck to make it easier to apply damage. And we saw some interesting structure work from some of the other top tier guilds, in particular Paragons and Russia, which is what you see here. Russia are on top, Paragons on the bottom. Russia were using Illuminary Blockade, which was a heal 4, and I figure that it was probably to help counter the counter enhanced skills. So as things were getting countered harder, the heal was going across the top. They were also using for their sort of siege, their offensive structures, the Inspiring Altar, which is a rally all 3 and a heal 4. So we also saw the Inspiring Altars come in, I think, for Paragon as well, although they were using the more standard Foreboding Archway for their defense. In both these cases, by the way, we had obviously surrendered, taken out the defensive structures as a sign of surrendering, but still going for core hits. So what you're seeing here are a couple of fights, one against Russia at the top with a core hit, and one against Paragons at the bottom with a core hit. But the use of those Inspiring Altars is interesting, and we didn't see a real benefit guild-wide of using that in our sims. So either it's something that's directly to do with the counter effect, although we were factoring that effect into all of our sims, or it's specific to the deck type that the guilds were using. Perhaps they were going very, very righteous based, although in both of these videos you can see that it's not a heavy righteous based in either case. Or perhaps we're just missing something in the sims, but it's definitely worth thinking about for the next guild war, in case there is some sort of synergy there that we can sort of leverage into our sort of structures. So just taking a look at these fights, they were both close fights. I think I went something like 3-2 on core hits for Russia. This is one of the wins that I had. A few more on Paragons, but you know, the decks are strong. They're very solid decks, as you'd expect in those sort of top guilds. Still, it was very nice to play against them. You get to see some pretty good setup decks and some cards that you don't normally play against. And that's one of the beauties of both guild wars when you pick a top team. And also to a certain degree, to a perhaps lesser degree, brawls as well. It's a really nice way to kind of see how some of the cards are acting, and you know, how they're used in some of the deck construction. So back to the game in hand. Again, more communication going out, just making sure that the bears aren't using all of their energy, making sure that you know, we start to use the word rush. We're starting to send the signal out that people have to start watching. We're now on the 20-minute mark, and so I have to be really careful at this point in watching what the enemy's doing. I'm going to jump back to structures again. I said that you could swap structures in the preparation phase, and we saw some guilds playing a few mind games, you know, letting it get down to the last 10 seconds and quickly switching them, and we thought we'd give that a go. It turns out that bears aren't very good at things like that. Unfortunately, the server kicked everybody out with about 20 seconds to go, and none of us could log back in, and we ended up, to our surprise, in a game with a lightning cannon level 1, strike 2 jam every 3, and an inspiring altar for rally all 1 on a 4 CD. Now that's really overpowered. You know, Amiga Beast didn't stand a chance here. Honestly, they probably thought we were trolling. We weren't. There was mass panic, hysteria, laughter going on in line about the fact that we'd just put 2 level 1 structures in by mistake, making the swap with a minute to go. We were going to swap back out. Everyone got booted out and couldn't get back in. Thankfully, you know, we managed to win the match quite convincingly, which is good. But that's not something you really want to be doing against a top tier guild. So if you're going to sort of play mind games, do bear in mind that you know, Snapticon's servers aren't the most reliable, and just have a contingency that you're not leaving it to the last 4 seconds to make a switch. Amusing stuff, and you can see here me valiantly fighting against a full level foreboding archway with my OP level 1 structures in tow there. All went well though, like I said. You know, no names. You know who you were that was swapping it. Much to the laughter of most of the guildmates in Grizzly Bairs. One of the definite highlights of the last war was that pure surprise as everybody logged in only to find those structures in play. So a little bit more maintenance, hit the arena again, recover some, or try to recover some stolen artifacts. Go in at a high level for an artifact still, 201 BR I think that was on Nexor. I mean, Nexor I'll manually play if it's above 170 or thereabouts. Barracus, like I said, just auto whatever. Barracus is strong on attack but weak on defense, same as my deck. Righteous I've got to watch out for. So you see I skip over that 193 BR. If there's easier ways to pick up artifacts, I certainly will. I had some subscribers ask how do I make the golden mean. You see bottom right there, me spinning through that sort of construction of the quad Syn. There's a lot of gold in the bottom right, and it really is the arena. The events are nice. You get a lot of money per fight for brawling, for guild wars, for the sort of event missions, but really arena every 25 minutes if you can do it, particularly during something like this event where you're watching anyway. You can see here that I am playing a righteous, so I play that manually just to be sure that I get the artifact. You're never quite sure what you're going to find. Some pinions cropping up out of nowhere and completely sting you, a tested citadel or something like that. So play that one through manually. Do get the artifact in that case. And back to watching for the score really. We're coming up to the last 10 minutes now. So this is the point at which if they're going to start rushing, it will be either on the 5-minute mark or the 10-minute mark. They are just about still in rush distance. At this point, we're not expecting it. We have enough energy and reserves, we believe. We were chatting in the officer channel, which you can't see in line. I've hidden that. Just making sure that we've got enough reserves kicking around to counter a rush if we need to. With that sort of lead and the way that the ebb and flow had gone of their energy, they really had consistently kind of kept plugging along. There wasn't a point at which they stopped and started to conserve and kind of raise the alarm bells that a rush could be imminent. So at this point we were fairly happy that, you know, we were in the lead. There was enough buffer. Yeah, sure, some people might log on, but not enough to undertake a rush. But it's still good practice. So communication goes out for sort of keeping watch, keep your eyes peeled, and just being ready in case anything strange happens. As I said, this is a very important fight. They're one rank above us on the last day, so we have to win this and also conserve enough to win the next match. So just a quick recap. You know, this was always going to be a tight match, closely ranked both in game as guild rank, but also within the guild war sort of rank. And really the strategy going into it was the strong decks are going to take out the defensive slot. The Bears kind of had announcements, they've had forum posts about the strategy of close wars, and they knew this was going to happen. You saw the communication come through, you saw the communication go out. You know, I can't hit with this defense, that's not a problem. we're on it, it's going to go down, conserve your stam. And we believe that that's probably what the enemy kind of did differently to us, in that they all hit the defense, which meant that they didn't maximize the stam usage. Once our defense was down, the bears that were holding stam could hit the empty slot, as well as bring on reinforcements, and created that lead. The activity is about the same, the participation is about the same, it's just the use of the stam was slightly different, and that's really how this war went. Just draw your attention down to the bottom right. I've been kind of completely trolled here. I ended up using all my gold and I'm still 3 SP short. I'm looking for battles and waiting for a guild war to kick off to make that final few SP, but I told you the RNG gods kind of didn't favour me, didn't smile upon me on that one. So into the last minute, there is a bit of an uplift of score on the enemy, but communications are going out. Don't panic, don't flinch, conserve your energy. We're absolutely fine, and you just got to keep that communication going. Watching the timer run in for the win, and the important thing here is, celebrate the success. All the bears did really well. Tell them that. The good stam management, they followed orders, they communicated well. Don't just take it for granted that they're going to do that. Actually say well done. People are sort of staying logged in, they're being active, they're using their own real life time to help you out. So make sure you get that message across. When they have done well, say it. And likewise, if they don't do well, if they go ham on a structure that you specifically said don't hit, or if you're constantly seeing someone dump in easy wars, then say that. That's what leadership's about. It's about the communication and the encouragement in the right ways, the positive reinforcements, and also being able to say when something's wrong. That's what it comes down to. It was an excellent win, a very close one, very important one for us to take, and we took it well. And I finally managed to make that Ayrkrane Syn. So that's the final results for Grizzly Bairs in this war. Rise of the Imperials, we came 16th overall, which is hugely respectable for a guild full of pretty much primarily free-to-play decks, I believe. I can't think of any whales in the guild at the moment, so that's an amazing achievement in my mind. Decent rank, and the bears performed very, very well all the way through the war. Picked up the rewards, and had a good time over that weekend and the Monday. We'll see how we do in the next war. I think before that we've got guild raids to look at, which should be very interesting to see how the weaker decks and the stronger decks in the guild can kind of work in tandem to escalate the boss at the right pace, in the most efficient way. So that's coming up over the next few days. Well, I hope you liked what you saw today. I hope the video was either entertaining or taught you something, or just showed you what it was like to play at a higher level guild, and perhaps you took some things away from it. And if you did, then I'd really appreciate a like. It kind of gives me the motivation to continue making videos. If you really liked what you saw, then do subscribe, and get notified as I push more videos up to YouTube. Thank you for watching. This is Ayrkrane Syn signing out.